Good morning, everybody. My name is Paula O'Reilly. I'm the CEO of AIIHPC Foundation, and we were delighted to be one of the funding partners for this research. So I think it's a really interesting morning we have ahead of us. So first, I'm going to introduce Orla Murphy. And Orla is a palliative care nurse at Milford Care Centre in Limerick and was the public patient involvement representative. And I think Gráinne just gave a really nice nod to the importance of having a parent's perspective in this type of research. So Orla is going to give us her perspective of being involved in the research process and how her own experience as a parent has informed the study findings. So thanks, Orla.
Hiya, I don't have any slides, just these. I am part of the brief regarding the public patient participant in with the lived experience. So we got involved. I am connected to Laura Lynn. My son attends Laura Lynn, and he has for the past 12 years. When we were discharged home from hospital, when he spent the first 21 months of his life in Crumlin Hospital, and then we got linked up with Laura Lynn, and we use facilities like short respite breaks, sibling camps, family camps, and psychological support. So I was on the Family Engagement Committee, which is a committee that they engage the families to see if they want to change anything. And I was on the Family Engagement Committee when the researchers approached the committee and asked for assistance in asking the question of how many children in Ireland have a life-limiting condition. So we were kind of surprised that we didn't have the data, to be honest, because it just kind of seems a bit insane. And also the fact that the data prior to that was based on international data and not on the Irish data. So how is the Irish system supposed to plan for something when they don't know how many children they're going to need? So obviously we agreed to get involved. I went forward faster than I needed. There are lots of medical advances in Ireland, and so that means then obviously children are living longer, and there are more complex needs on the back of that. And parents themselves obviously want to give their child the best quality of life they can possibly get. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to have the services in order to be able to actually achieve that. So the data showed crucial data, and that was the estimated prevalence of children with life-limiting condition in Ireland is way higher than the national policy actually suggests. And actually 17 out of 100 discharges in CHI group are children with a life-limiting condition, which is enormous. I happen to have a child with a life-limiting condition and complex needs. As we say at home, he's got a few bits going on. Don't really get into the whole nitty-gritty thing of it. He doesn't really need to know it, but he is an amazing child. And like all parents, I think their children are absolutely fabulous. My child is absolutely fabulous. And I suppose when you look at a setting like this, and we talk about children and all the complex needs and everything, I think we kind of forget that there are kids at the back of it. And my little guy, he's amazing. He has kind of, I don't know how he's done it, but he's done outstanding all the medical advances and stuff that he has. And like, he loves sport, he loves watching rugby, he loves watching GAA, like he can talk, which is amazing because he didn't talk for an awful long time until the age of 9. Now he won't shut up. And I understand the whole concept of the back door in GAA, which I never understood before. And he also is amazing. When he goes into the consultant's room, I suppose lots of kids might have a neurological deficit, but Cian is right up there. He can tell you every MRI, date of every MRI appointment, consultant appointment, CT appointment. His memory is amazing. No one in our house, including my husband, cannot forget a birthday or anniversary because it just can't be done, because he remembers everything. So, you know, we just have to look at that then. So, we are the reality behind the numbers that we see here today, and we are the constant living and the constant juggle of what it's like to have a child with life-limiting condition. So our day could spend basically juggling hospital appointments, constantly trying to navigate the hospital system to get in touch with the consultant secretary to get an appointment for your child, dealing with pharmacies, making sure they have the stocks in place, because you just simply can't do without. And also navigating your family life, bringing your other child to the GA matches, going to work, because bills still have to be paid regardless of you having a child with a life-limiting condition. Life does not stop, you just can continue on. So on a day-to-day basis, you need to be ready. You need to be ready if something changes. If life changes, he could be fine 1 minute and then change the next minute. So you have your to-go bag ready. You have your meds stocked up, because you cannot do without your meds, because some of them are unlicensed and all that kind of stuff. So you have to bring all of those with you. And then you're managing to go for hospital appointments or hospital visits, and you're trying to figure out everything that's going on, and then to get a phone call to say that the bed isn't available. And so you have to begin the whole exhausting cycle all over again. And you're probably exhausted listening to me, but that is the reality of our life. We have to do all of this, and also we have to communicate with all the consultants. So the lack of communication in between the consultants is huge. We don't have that basis. We don't have, when my child goes into hospital, I have him beside me. And he can understand everything that's going on. And I have to talk to the consultant about my child who's got a life-limiting condition. Just because he's a life-limiting condition does not mean that he's thick. He can perfectly understand what's going on. So I have to discuss what's going on, what recommendations you have, what recommendations you don't have, where are we going, what are the possibilities of this being complex or not. And then I have to retain all that information and think about it and disseminate it, and then relay it back to the consultant's team that it might be in Limerick, because the communication level isn't exactly hectic. You could wait for about 3 months for a consultant to send their correspondence back to your local team. So, I'm fortunate I have a medical background, but not everybody does. I happen to be a palliative care nurse just by and by. It's been very helpful, but at the same time, it is very difficult for parents, and even to remember the terminology, and you'd be looking up things going, what did he say? And God, did you say that? And what do you think of that? Oh God, I don't know. And you're trying to remember all of these things. And then the poor consultant at the other end of the phone then, or, in the thing has to listen to you trying to explain what the difficulties are, because he doesn't have the information. And so, that's a huge thing as well for us. And we also need to, we need to look beyond the medical charts in order to create a better future for our children. There's just a few small improvements that could be made. I do really feel that mandatory basic palliative care training is just so important for everybody, especially in the healthcare system. You never know when you're going to meet a family that is going through an absolutely awful experience, or just starting off in the whole thing of having a child with a life-limiting condition. It even goes down to the kitchen staff. How they speak to you can really have such an impact in your life. You just never know. And, they could say something flippant and you wouldn't mean it, but at the same time, it will stay with you forever, because you are living it, not them. So I think that is really important if we actually make it, and we have to make it mandatory, because with the best will in the world, lots of people go, sure, I must go do that. But if you make it mandatory, then they have to do it. And we're always anxious for routine procedures. It doesn't make a difference how often. My son has had, I don't know how many procedures. Like my other little guy, he has counted key and scars. He's got 14 scars. He's going to be adding another couple now in the next couple of months, because he's having spinal fusion done, which will be great fun. But they're really important, and it's just that we are resource intensive. I know we are, but when we go into hospital, we don't just go in for the routine tonsillectomy. That would be great. We go in for, say, hypothetically, like a bowel obstruction, because that's what we did recently just for the fun of it. And, we go in, and we are resource intensive because everything is a domino effect. It's not just one thing, it's a whole load of things. So if he's nausea and vomiting, then this happens and that happens. And that's why all these resources are used, because we just don't know, because they're so complicated. And, we have the medical advances, so this is what we have. So we have to be able to treat it. And I do think hospital staff need to treat parents with more of a holistic approach. People are very kind of, when you say you give them support. When I go into hospital with my child, I cannot leave the room. I cannot leave. I cannot go to the toilet. I cannot get a cup of tea. I cannot have a shower. The last time I was in hospital, I hadn't had a shower in 3 days. And I was very hungry by the time my husband came up, and vicious. So, people say, oh, you can leave. You can't leave. So that's the thing, like, you can't leave. You're kind of bribing student nurses to come in and mind your child so you can go to Dunn's to get something to eat or whatever it is. So we really need to be mindful of that, like, and if parents are less stressed and less anxious, and then that will feed back on the child, because they feed off our energy and it will impact on how they recover. So we really need to look at that. The basics now, you're not talking about mad stuff, just the basics, or even when you go into a consultant's appointment, you get a student nurse, student doctor, anyone, have a chat. I did it the other day. I asked two nurses, would you take my child when I can talk to the consultant about the post-op complications of complex spinal fusion? He does not need to know. Now, he's looking it up online, but he doesn't need to hear it. So, you know, you need to be mindful of these children. I know they're a complex, but we have to retain all of this information and then go home and sort it all out. It is a huge undertaking. And I know it's time consuming, but if you give us the time now, it will help us in the future. And then finally, I'm probably gone over, the flag on the chart, I do think that's really important as well. That's very simple. You basically have a flag on the chart. This child needs complex needs. He needs a bit of support. Great, happy days. We'll send in a student nurse to give us a hand, whatever it may be. You know, just to have a bit more support going on. I spoke about the communication. And obviously the health identifier, I mean, that would just be amazing all over for anywhere in the health service. But it also would take pressure off us. So we wouldn't have to relay the reports and what the consultant said yesterday. And the teams also need to talk to each other. They tend not to. So we need to have confidence that the endocrine is speaking to the orthopaedic and the orthopaedic is speaking to GI, that I am not responsible for making sure that the GI knows that my son is in hospital. You know, I know it's a big hospital, but like I'm sure they all have their numbers. So just talk to them, because it makes life so much easier for us, because we're at the side of it going, God, I don't know where they are. Maybe they haven't a clue what's going on. You know, and I'm sure they do. Going forward, there's also geographical inequalities. The girls did speak of that. You know, regardless of where you are, your specialist palliative care and palliative care services shouldn't depend on your air code. Small things, when the hospital rings up and say, we have a procedure here, a bed for you, can you come up in an hour? No, I can't. I live in Limerick. It's 2.5 hours away. Or, you know, you have a hospital appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning. That means I have to get up at 4, which means I have a child with a life-limiting condition, trying to figure out meds, feeds, changing. Where am I going to change him? I have to stop the car on the way up to basically rest him so he doesn't get uncomfortable because they're travelling in. So all these things are huge. And then by the time you get there, you don't actually see the consultant until 2 hours later. And you're all just sitting there with your random appointment for 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's just about seeing the wood from the trees and seeing, you know, we can talk about how it's going to impact. We have to directly impact to make our lives easier and our children's lives easier. And then my experience about the PPI, I found it really interesting. I really did enjoy it. I didn't really know what to expect. I do have certain recommendations that I think would be important. I met all the girls and my colleagues online, which was very nice, and you know, it was great and all of that, and it was enjoyable. But I do think, considering the emotive subject we are talking about children with life-limiting conditions. We are talking about all the resources that we use up. We're talking about all of that. But and like, I felt fine. I have a degree of emotional attachment. I can talk about that kind of stuff. It doesn't massively bother me. I do happen to be a palliative care nurse, so you do have a level of a learned attachment within your job in order to be able to do it, otherwise you'd be useless. But I do think it needs to be considered, you know, when you're looking forward again for other PPIs, that you do have an element of a little bit of a personal engagement, just to make it a little bit more personable for people, and it can kind of reduce down those barriers that you kind of feel, God, I like that, I'm just a PPI and I'm with all these other researchers, but that we are really valid, and this is what this is about, that we need to be seen. And I also think there should be a pool or a banking of PPIs for children in palliative care. I know there is one for Voices for Care. I've recently joined that. But I think it would give the researchers a little bit more of a choice of who to pick. They kind of got landed with me. I don't know if they really wanted to, but anyway. But I do think it would give them a bit more choice, and it also gave the parents a little bit more autonomy to be able to say no, to say, look, you know what, actually it doesn't suit me, or I might sound great for doing it, but when you're going through having a child with a life-limiting condition, there are stages in your journey, and sometimes you're just too fragile and you're not ready to go into that space. And you do have to do an element of protecting yourself, because otherwise you get a bit of like post-traumatic stress. I know you're probably thinking, what the hell? But we were in Crumlin for 21 months, like that'll never leave me, unfortunately. So you do have to be a little bit protective, and I think if you have a little bit more autonomy, you can say, actually, you know what, it doesn't suit me, but you know what, someone else over there can do it. So I do think that would be good. And I also, look, we were delighted to be involved in the research, really delighted, and because it gives a chance for our voice to be heard, and that is the main thing. Thank you.